Hello, I'm Riley Carlson. This is the News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, the Syrian government says the bombing of a mosque in Homs is another desperate attempt to destabilize the country. Israel raids towns in the occupied West Bank, detaining Palestinians and tearing up streets with bulldozers. Nigeria, they're on edge after U.S. strikes on what Donald Trump says are targets affiliated with ISIL. Plus, waiting for peace. Families displaced by fighting at the Thai-Cambodia border.
He'd like to get inside that's not possible right now. Investigations are still ongoing. This wasn't a suicide attack. Al-Suna spoke to the imam of the mosque, who said that explosives were placed in the western wall of the mosque, ready to be detonated during Friday prayers. Ansar al-Sunnah, a Sunni supremacist Islamist group, claimed responsibility for the attack on their social media platform. This is the same group that claimed responsibility for a June church bombing at Mar Ilyas Church, which killed 25 and wounded dozens more. Homs is a mixed city. There are Alawites, Christians, and Sunnis. And whoever did this may have intended to stir sectarian violence in the central Syrian city. But so far, things seem calm, things seem quiet, and the security forces seem to have the area under control. Ayman Ogana, Al Jazeera, Homs, Syria.
The violence is the latest to seriously challenge the Syrian government's ability to unite the country after the fall of the Assad regime. On December 22nd, fighting broke out in Aleppo between Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and government forces. A ceasefire is now in place, but efforts to integrate the SDF into the National Army have stalled. Days earlier, the U.S. said it had carried out airstrikes on ISIL fighters, infrastructure, and weapons sites in Syria after an attack in Palmyra killed 3 Americans. In July, hundreds of people in Suwaida were killed in fighting between Druze militias and Bedouin tribes. Israel also carried out strikes against Syrian government forces, claiming it was protecting the Druze community. And since the fall of Assad, Israel has carried out more than 1,000 airstrikes and hundreds of cross-border raids in southern Syria, while expanding its military presence near the occupied Golan Heights. Rob Geist-Pinfold is a lecturer in international security at King's College London. He says the new Syrian government is being constantly challenged.
I don't think at this stage the state is in fact disintegrating, but it is being increasingly challenged. It's being challenged by ISIL, it's being challenged by Ansar al-Sunnah, it's being challenged by Druze groups in the Suwaida region of southwest Syria, and of course by the Kurdish-led SDF's refusal to integrate in eastern Syria. And all this points to the main problem in Syria today, that the government in Damascus, it is increasing its strength, it's increasing its capacity and capabilities, but it's still is showing that it's very, very difficult for it to exercise its sovereignty, not just throughout all of Syria, the regions it definitely doesn't control, like eastern Syria and Suwaida, but in the parts of Syria it supposedly does control, the big cities like Aleppo, like Damascus, and of course now like Homs. So this is the key challenge for the government, showing that they are sovereign in practice, not just on paper.
The Israeli military is carrying out raids across the occupied West Bank, including in the town of Kabatia, south of Jenin. Helicopters are circling an area where military vehicles and bulldozers have entered. Soldiers can be seen patrolling the village. The Israeli army says it has arrested the father of a suspect in a stabbing and car ramming that happened earlier on Friday. That attack killed 2 people in northern Israel. Emergency services say a 68-year-old man died after being hit by a vehicle in the city of Afula. Israeli media says a 20-year-old woman was stabbed to death during the incident. At least 2 others were injured. Nida Ibrahim has more details on the ongoing raids from Ramallah.
We might be looking at a days-long Israeli assault against Palestinians in the town of Qabatia, as Israeli forces pushed large numbers of troops inside the town. And we've been hearing from witnesses there that the Israeli bulldozers have started destroying some streets, taking several homes as military bases in anticipation of what Palestinians expect to be days-long attack. Now, they say that while the Israeli forces say that this assault aims to thwart any Palestinian militants or Palestinian fighters from conducting attacks against Israeli targets, Palestinians remind the world that since January of this year, Israeli forces have been stationed inside the Jenin refugee camp as well as other refugee camps in the occupied West Bank under the very same excuse. So they believe that this large show of force that is being carried out by the Israeli forces now in Qabatia is one way that the Israeli politicians want to score point with their audience, as well as the Israeli defense minister and the Israeli government officials, including the prime minister. They say any attack that is directed against Palestinians would definitely help Israeli politicians in their push for the elections that are expected to be held next year in 2026. As far as Palestinians are concerned, they say that Israel does not need an excuse to attack and to raid their towns and their villages. As we've seen from the latest numbers, the Israeli raids to Palestinian towns average 60 per day. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, Palestine.
Russian forces have attacked the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, killing at least 2 people and injuring 6 others. The mayor says one of the bombs hit vehicles on a busy road, trapping people in burning cars. City officials say they're assessing the extent of the damage in an area they say has no military facilities. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will meet President Donald Trump on Sunday to discuss a peace deal with Russia. Zelensky says a 20-point peace plan is 90% ready, but that he needs to discuss security guarantees with Trump. He said he'd be willing to put the plan to a referendum if Russia agrees to a ceasefire. Joining us now from Vancouver, Canada, is Michael Boserkiw. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and founder of the World Briefing Report on Substack. Michael, thank you for being with us. Some of those security guarantees are mentioned in this reworked plan that was sent to Moscow earlier this week. How important is it for Zelensky to get the Trump administration on side with these points, but then maybe more crucially, keep them on his side?
Exactly. Good to be with you. Well, crucially important. But, the main thing about security guarantees is most Ukrainians are deservedly traumatized by even the phrase security guarantees, by what happened some years ago with the Budapest Memorandum. Russia, the UK, and the United States were guarantors of security. And then we saw what happened in 2014, forcible annexation of Crimea, taking of the Donbass, and then, of course, in 2022. The big problem I have with this is that Mr. Trump may very well sign the deal and commit the United States, with perhaps the backing of the Senate, to security guarantees. But what is to stop another administration or Mr. Trump himself from walking away from those commitments? And I got to tell you as well, one more quick thing is that I just returned from the United States, and there is zero appetite among the people I talked to there about getting involved in any further conflicts in the world. So it's a real hornet's nest at the moment.
And that's a difficult thing, not just maybe for the United States, but also maybe for these European partners, because this reworked plan includes, an international force to be there and to sort of monitor these territorial disputes that still need to be worked out in this plan. How difficult is that going to be to sell, not just to the American public, but to European partners or partners from anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was part of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine in 2014, 2015. We monitored the entire part of Ukraine. Now, the so-called demilitarized zone and other monitoring zones talked about in the peace plan represents a huge area. And, I'm not so sure that many international observers would even sign up for such an observation mission. There was one big thing that we noticed as part of the OSCE mission is that the Russians are masters at deception, at lying, and at hiding things. So it's very, very difficult, even with proposed space technology that I think is mentioned in the plan, to keep the parties honest.
And maybe a bit to that point also, Michael, some critics of the original plan say that it favored the Russian side going into this. This new framework obviously holds some concessions from Ukraine, but does Russia really have any reason to respond to this or negotiate on this new proposal?
Well, the signals we're all getting is that the Kremlin will reject most of it, because it has, I think, tilted more in Ukraine's favor. Another big problem, and I think the Russians know this very, very well, is that part of the plan requires a referendum, as proposed by Mr. Zelensky. And how on earth will a referendum be held when millions of Ukrainians are overseas? They're not coming back anytime soon, even with a peace agreement. And Ukrainian overseas diplomatic posts are in no position whatsoever to hold any kind of voting overseas after being decapitated by the Zelensky administration. So a lot of problems in terms of the implementation, but we know from previous agreements, one after the other, that Russia, even if they may sign on the piece of paper, it's not worth the paper it's signed on because of their habit of violating things.
Yeah, millions of them are overseas, so that would pose a challenge for a referendum, but also millions of them are in disputed territories as well. And so while we're talking about this peace plan that I think many people in Ukraine would probably say is going very slowly, the barrage of attacks has been growing in Ukraine. The war is about to hit the 4-year mark. How does that change how Ukraine, or indeed Russia, is negotiating here?
Yeah, great points. And, what may happen between now and any peace plan is, and I believe it's already happening, is Mr. Putin is already delivering on his pledge of making Ukraine a landlocked country. And sadly, to tell you, that means also cutting off completely where I'm usually based in Odessa and cutting off the port. That would pretty much make Ukraine economically viable. As for the many, many Ukrainians caught under Russian occupation, I can tell you they want nothing more than to be back on Ukrainian territory, because they've seen the persecution, the oppression, the stealing of Ukrainian children, the war crimes day after day, that, as they put it, makes living under Russian occupation like living in hell. It's a terrible, terrible situation for them.
Michael Bosircu, we appreciate your time and your insight here on Al Jazeera. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The United States has carried out airstrikes against what it says are ISIL fighters in Nigeria in coordination with the government there. President Donald Trump said the group has been viciously attacking and killing Christians in Nigeria. Nigerian officials say armed groups target both Muslim and Christian communities. Ahmed Idris reports from Lagos.
U.S. missiles launched towards northwestern Nigeria. One landed here at Jabu. People in the village say it was never a base for terrorists.
It was scary. When the missile landed, the village shook and a huge fireball lit up the sky.
The U.S. military says it targeted Islamic State fighters in Sokoto State. The State Department recently designated Nigeria a country of particular concern under the U.S. Religious Freedom Act. President Donald Trump called the targets terrorist scum, claiming they targeted Christians in the region, despite Muslims also being attacked by armed groups. Officials from both countries say the strikes were a joint operation.
It's not about religion. It's not about who said what. It is about getting the results. So we're ready to work with others in fighting terrorism, in fighting insecurity in Nigeria and in our region.
In 2025, Nigeria recorded strikes and high-profile kidnappings carried out by armed groups such as Boko Haram and others referred to as bandits. Although both terrorized people in villages, an offshoot of Boko Haram known as the Islamic State West Africa Province is known to be affiliated with ISIL and operates mainly in the northeast.
Many Christians and Muslims have been targeted in a series of attacks by armed groups in Nigeria. While the United States military operation is welcomed by many here in Lagos and in other parts of the country, many people in the north are worried that the area will become a new theater of operations for the United States military, and they fear they could become casualties.
The joint missile strike is a major military escalation in Nigeria, and a warning from the U.S. Secretary of Defense that there is more to come will have rung loud in the ears of local people having to clear up. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Lagos, Nigeria.
In Sudan, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces say the Sudanese army has carried out an attack in South Darfur. A senior member of the RSF says the strike took place in the city of Nyala, which is controlled by the paramilitary group. The strike allegedly hit a market, damaging civilian infrastructure. The Sudanese army has not responded. Fighting has also spread in the Kordofan region. Al Jazeera's Mohammed Val has more from the city of Kosti, where thousands have been fleeing the violence in North Kordofan.
It's another day of activity here at the center where new arrivals from the fighting areas are received every day and registered. As you can see behind me, there are more people in this tent. The people who were here yesterday and before yesterday have already been moved to the displacement camps, but we have more coming. And if you look here, you can see some of the transportation means being used to move people from this place after having been registered to the displacement camps. The authorities here have a lot on their hands, and this is an activity that is going on a daily basis. And sometimes they are overstretched, sometimes it is less. Today is Friday, we have less activity, but if you can come with me, I'll show you also how they are being helped in terms of food and other necessities. We have, this is the kitchen dedicated to the preparation of food for the people who come to this place. Meals are prepared here by these ladies, and we don't see any foreign NGOs working in this place today. We haven't seen some also yesterday, and that people here say means that there is less support given sometimes, particularly on weekends for these people. The dishes that are being prepared here are basic. If you look with me here, this is just lentil, and that's something that they are being served every single day. That's all they can hope for, lentil. Sometimes they have onion, and that means the day they have onion, that's a special treat. The lady here is preparing a mixture of onion and parsley. Parsley is something amazing if they find it. Sometimes they have some of that because it has omega-3 and it is richer than the other items. But also they use also onion in the dishes. These are, as I said, things that are not happening every day. Most of the time it is lentil and bread. But today, particularly today, they say they have new things to serve, and they are very happy with that. The lady is here telling us. That's the situation, a slice of life of how people are being treated when they come here. There is talk of shortage of supplies, shortage of food and other necessities. But the authorities, when there is no one else to help, they make sure to at least bring something to help these people survive. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera, Kosti, Sudan.
Malaysia's High Court has sentenced former Prime Minister Najib Razak to 15 years in jail for abuse of power and money laundering. Najib was found guilty in the country's biggest corruption trial. He faced charges relating to the embezzlement of $563 million from the state investment fund 1MDB. Najib is already serving a 6-year jail term from a separate conviction linked to the fraud.
I'm looking forward for this case to go to the Court of Appeal, because every single point the judge had dealt with has been dealt with in a manner where our cross-examination of the witnesses, where our defense have not been examined by the judge. I can say this with all the clarity.
Thailand's defense minister will join a new round of talks with neighboring Cambodia on ending cross-border attacks. Both sides are facing increasing international pressure to return to a ceasefire. The fighting has displaced almost 1 million people. Asad Beg is in the border town of Phoi Phet, meeting families who fled the violence.
Children don't understand this conflict. They only feel its consequences. Since the ceasefire broke down, violence has returned, and for families here, safety has disappeared with it. More than 600,000 Cambodians have now been displaced, according to authorities, and the numbers are still rising.
When I was at home, I heard the explosion and I was scared. My mum called me to go inside to calm me down. When the bombs were closer and closer, my mum gathered our things and we left for the camp. When we arrived, we set up the tent to sleep.
The sound of explosions can still be heard from this camp, a reminder that the fighting is not over.
The sound of the explosion was too loud. We have many small kids, so I decided to leave. It was so loud, my roof was shaking.
In the border town of Phoi Phet in Cambodia, the streets are deserted. This is the country's largest border crossing. Normally crowded, noisy, and alive with trade. Now there is nothing. Everyone is on edge. No one knows when or where the next shell will land.
The Thai military shelled Phoi Phet a lot this morning, injuring 2 people. They keep shelling. Did you hear that?
At a nearby hospital, another reminder of how civilians are bearing the brunt of this conflict. 3-year-old Ran Chameng was hit by shrapnel while playing outside her home with her father. Now both lie side by side in the same hospital ward, victims of the same blast. Back at the camp, families are surviving on aid from the government and from fellow Cambodians. Their smiles mask exhaustion, fear, and the uncertainty of how long this will last.
The lives of people in this camp are now in limbo, hinging on where the fighting stops. Talks are ongoing, but progress here is measured by the hours passed without the sound of explosions. So they wait, listening, watching, and hoping, because for them, peace is about more than politics. It's about the moment they'll finally be able to go home. Asad Beg, Al Jazeera, on the Cambodian-Thailand border.
Myanmar's junta plans to lift a curfew in Yangon that's been in place since 2021 ahead of Sunday's general elections. The military leaders say the polls will return the country to a civilian government and a multi-party democracy. But opponents say it's a sham because only parties backed by the military are taking part. Millions of people are also unable to vote because of the ongoing civil war. Tony Chang reports from Yangon.
This is one of Yangon's many bustling morning markets, and everyone's out shopping for provisions for the day. We're less than 48 hours away from the general election. The general election that the military say is going to return a civilian government and restore peace to the country. And security here is very lax. We've seen a few policemen out on the street, but everyone's out. Everything appears calm and normal. That is something of a surprise, though, because according to the ACLED, an organization that tracks conflict data, Myanmar, outside of Gaza, is the deadliest conflict in the world. They estimate that 83,000 people have died around the country since the military coup of 2021. And outside of major urban centers, the conflict still rages today. That's something that we saw for ourselves.
An impromptu football match before school. Education is infrequent in this region of Myanmar. The teachers are volunteers or exiles from the city who joined the civil disobedience movement after the coup in February 2021. As class begins, a video warning of the dangers of airstrikes and landmines. The children don't seem concerned. They've heard it before. Then, in the distance, the thud of artillery. Once they realize what's going on, they run for the shelters. This isn't a drill.
We've just heard a loud explosion coming from over there. About 5 minutes ago, there was a spotted plane in the air. Now the children are hiding in the bunker, waiting for the all clear.
Crammed into the darkness, hiding behind the sandbags, small faces taunt and alert. When a lull comes in the firing, the teachers hurry them out. They need to disperse, running home as quickly as they can. That's the end of the school day. Not everyone escapes. Tintin Yu wipes away the tears as she tells me about her sister. One night in mid-October, she says, Win had gone to bed early. She never woke up. Shards of shrapnel from an artillery barrage ripped through her stomach, and her sister has no doubt who's responsible.
We hate the military junta. They killed my sister. Now my mother is asking for her. She doesn't even know she's dead.
2 weeks ago, the military bombed a hospital in Rakhine State, killing more than 30 people. Civilians aren't just collateral damage here. Often, they're the targets. Attacks like that are forcing Dr. A. Moore to pack up and move. She's one of only a handful of medics in the area, but she thinks the military knows where she is.
We are relocating our hospital. A few days ago, there was an airstrike on a resistance-run hospital which killed a doctor and 2 medics.
In the hills above Bago, emergency responders are taking a 10-year-old landmine victim on the treacherous journey to Thailand. He's been in a coma for 5 days. His vital signs are weak, and help is still 48 hours away. The latest victim of a war that nobody knows about. Tony Chang, Al Jazeera, Bago, Central Myanmar.
Still ahead here on this news hour.
I'm Malcolm Webb at the Point Lenana summit of Mount Kenya, once famous for its snow cap, which has almost entirely vanished. We'll take a look at what's happened to it.
Plus, simmering anger spills over into street protests in a British town. We'll explain why. And it's the best day for the bowlers in the last 115 years between Australia and England. That's on the way in sports with Peter.
Hello there. It's been a very divided picture when it comes to the weather across Europe. It's been very quiet but cold across the north, very active with lots of wet weather to be found across the south, and that's still there. We've got the rumble of storms affecting Portugal with heavy rain down in the south, Spain and the islands across the Mediterranean. It's still looking a little bit wet across southern parts of Italy, but much drier across the north, dry as well for that southeast corner. But wintry weather will continue to affect Turkey. as well as the Baltic states and Russia. And another winter wave is set to pick up across Scandinavia, where temperatures have dropped down. Oslo coming in at 2 degrees Celsius there on Saturday. But for that central strip of Europe, it does remain pretty mild. Temperatures are set to pick up for western parts of France. Temperatures are lingering around the average for cities like London and Berlin. It is going to get colder, however, out towards the northeast, -4 degrees Celsius in Moscow on Sunday. But the cold is starting to push out of Greece. Athens is 15 degrees Celsius there on Sunday, with sunshine taking us through to Monday. That's your weather.
January on Al Jazeera. Uganda's long-serving president seeks re-election for a record 7th term. But will the country's youth look to a new leader? All Hail reveals the networks of power and profit that sustain militarism and their impact on our world. A year into his 2nd term, the US president has rarely been out of the headlines. What lies ahead in 2026? People and Power investigates whether weapons from the Balkans are fueling violence on the streets of Sweden. Many see space as an untapped frontier. The China Space Exhibition showcases the country's expanding ambitions beyond Earth. January on Al Jazeera.
On Counting the Cost, 2025, the year of tariffs. From the US to China, Europe and Africa, power is shifting. Supply chains are being rewritten. Alliances are being tested. So who's winning and who's being left behind? And what does it mean for us all in 2026? Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, you're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. A bomb attack on a mosque in Syria's Homs province has killed 8 people and injured more than 18. It happened in an Alawite neighborhood. That's a religious sect largely associated with the former Assad regime. The Israeli military is carrying out raids across the occupied West Bank, including the town of Kabatia south of Jenin. Multiple Palestinians have been detained and bulldozers have been ripping up roads. The U.S. has carried out airstrikes against what it says are ISIL fighters in Nigeria in coordination with the government there. President Donald Trump said the group had been viciously attacking and killing Christians in Nigeria. Israel has become the first country to recognize Somaliland as an independent and sovereign state. Somaliland is a breakaway region that declared independence from Somalia in 1991, but it is not internationally recognized. Israel says the recognition is based on extensive dialogue during the past year. The African Union, along with several countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, and Turkey, have condemned the move. Yossi Meckelberg is a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. He says Somaliland holds strategic value for Israel.
If you look at, map geopolitically, the position of Somaliland at the mouth of the Red Sea, very close to Yemen, which we know over the last 2 years, one of the fronts that Israel fights with the Houthis in Yemen. And it has been operating there for some time. It gives it a kind of almost a formal stand or position in Somaliland. Somaliland is also closer to Iran, which shows the kind of the strategic thinking in Israel. It's not about that the situation is going to be diffused anytime soon, but the other way around, that it's, if at all, it's going to be escalated and any time in the future. So it builds basically a sort of relation that allow it to have potentially even base in much closer to the Gulf.
In Gaza, Palestinians have started returning to Friday prayers in the ruins of mosques damaged by Israeli strikes. For the first time in several months, the call to prayer echoed through the loudspeakers. Hani Mahmoud was there as prayers resumed.
An exciting and emotional moment for everyone here, holding prayer for the first time in one of Gaza's oldest and most historic landmarks, Al Omari Mosque. I'm in Old Gaza City and I'm walking toward Al Omari Mosque, where worshippers started together to perform what has been described as the first prayer congregation in months. Al Omari Mosque is one of the oldest and most important landmarks in Gaza, a site that has stood for centuries. In recent months, it has been hit hard by relentless Israeli bombardment, sustaining extensive damage. I'm walking inside the parts that are left of Al Omari Mosque here, and it's quite dangerous as many of these areas are at risk of collapsing. The damage and the destruction is quite significant here and visible everywhere, not to the structure itself, but to a place that holds religious and cultural and historical significance. But despite the damage, people gather here today to pray. Many returning for the first time since they were forced into displacement. We're inside this room that has been prepared for worshippers here. It's a large temporary prayer hall, and for those attending, the prayer itself is not just a religious act, it's an act of resilience, an act of determination for people forced into displacement for 2 years, deprived from worshiping and praying in this place.
I got goosebumps when I remembered my martyred sons, Abdullah, Jamal al-Nabi, and Nur al-Iman, as well as their mother and sister. All of them were killed in the war. They were an integral part of this mosque.
So as the prayers conclude and worshipers have started to leave, the call to prayer once again starts to echo through Gaza, carrying with it both grief and determination. Hani Mahmoud, Al Jazeera, from Gaza City, Palestine.
Scientists say the world is set to lose 3/4 of its glaciers to climate change. That's affecting billions of people who rely on the water to grow food. The crisis has come into sharp focus on Mount Kenya. In the last of our series of reports from the mountain, Malcolm Webb takes a look at the remaining ice around the summit.
A century ago, there were about 18 glaciers on Mount Kenya. The biggest was the Lewis Glacier. Charles Machiri, who's been guiding hikers up the mountain for 25 years, took us to see what's left of it.
It's melting here. I can see it happening.
What do you think should be done?
If there's anything that maybe human being can do to save maybe the global warming and to restore this one, it would be better. Yeah, that will be good for everyone here.
It's normal for the ice to melt and water to run off when the sun shines. The problem is it's not being replaced. And the ice that we're looking at now is about 1/20th of what was here a century ago, and scientists say what's left could be gone in about 5 years.
The Lewis Glacier is about 300 meters below the Point Lenana summit. Charles and his team took us up.
There's a thin covering of frost on the floor. Our guides say several years ago this climb had to be done often wearing crampons because it was knee-deep in snow.
Our climb was easier without deep snow. As the world gets warmer, tropical glaciers are the first to go. Mount Kenyas are expected to disappear before almost any other. The loss of ice threatens water supplies and ecosystems that millions of people depend on. At nearly 5,000 meters above sea level, we were on top of the clouds. Until the clouds moved in on top of us. The weather changes quickly here, and so does the climate.
Scientists say it's not just the increasing temperatures, but it's also the reducing moisture in the air at elevations like this that mean that when the little bits of ice thaw in the sunshine, they don't get replaced. And that's why highland, high elevation tropical glaciers are disappearing so much more quickly than anyone ever expected. And that's why Mount Kenya's iconic snowcap is almost completely gone. Malcolm Webb, Al Jazeera, Mount Kenya.
This year, California experienced a cycle of historic wildfires, torrential rains, and floods. Climate scientists say extreme weather events will become more intense as global warming worsens. John Hendren reports from Los Angeles and the neighborhood of Pacific Palisades.
The Pacific Palisades fire came roaring over this hill and into the village, consuming most of the homes and, amazingly, leaving some untouched by the flames. Unfortunately for Michael Wilson, his home wasn't one of them.
It was very terrifying, yes, especially at that night when we saw the embers go down the street. It was like a Halloween movie. It was the most frightening thing to ever see.
He's rebuilding after last January's blaze with fire resistance in mind and a realist's philosophy about the environment.
But you have to prepare for it. We're living in a different age. The earth is changing. We're all changing, so we need to adapt.
Down the road in Malibu, Duke's beachfront restaurant evaded the fire that raked across the shoreline, torching buildings along the water. A month later, floodwaters from heavy February rains rolled down this canyon and into the parking lot.
We were almost done with our smoke remediation from the fire, and Las Flores Canyon here turned into a river and flooded our whole restaurant.
Nearly a year later, the rebuilding project is nearly over, but the dangers to Duke's are not. Jimmy Chavez has watched the tide climb by about a foot in the past 2 decades.
Surprisingly, the damage has never been caused by that side. It's only been caused by that side. Although it's very clear the sea level is rising.
More heavy rains in November have swept toxic runoff from the burn scars left by the catastrophic 2025 wildfire season downhill, over land, and into the ocean.
Climate scientists are concerned that with rising global temperatures and more volatile conditions, scenes like this could become more and more common.
Forecasters say Southern California will likely see an increasingly dangerous combination: rising temperatures and drier conditions, with heavier rains and flooding leading to more vegetation growth and more fuel for wildfires. Without major changes on this warming planet, California's destructive climate whiplash is only likely to grow worse. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood of Los Angeles.
Illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border have fallen to their lowest levels in more than 50 years. It comes after the Trump administration introduced sweeping detention and deportation policies. The drop has fundamentally changed cities across the border. Julia Galliano has this report from Nogales, Mexico.
Dinner time at the largest migrant shelter in the Mexican border city of Nogales used to be much busier. 2 years ago, some 300 migrants and asylum seekers waited here for their chance to cross into the United States. Today, that number has dwindled to 40. Accessing asylum at the U.S. border, a right protected by the Constitution, has all but disappeared. But these families have little choice. Most of them are unable to return home for fear for their lives.
Sometimes we feel desperate, but we haven't considered crossing illegally. We are waiting for the asylum process to open up, but we are just stuck here with no work, no money.
1,300 kilometers away, across from Eagle Pass, Texas, another border crossing lies mostly idle. In 2023, this place made international headlines for registering thousands of daily migrant crossings, leading the Texan city to declare a state of emergency. In the first full 8 months of this Trump administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported just over 85,000 encounters at the border. That's the lowest number since 1970. This is just one spot of what must be hundreds like it across the country. On any given day in recent years, you'd see a group of migrants being led here by a smuggler. They would throw a rope over that fence and jump into the U.S. illegally. Today, as you can see, it is completely empty. We tracked down a people smuggler who asked us to call him Agustin to ask how his business has changed over the last year.
We can get them across, but people are scared of arriving there and not finding work, or being detained before having a chance to pay back their debts for getting there. They see it as a bad investment now, because if they get deported, they lose everything.
He says the images coming out of the U.S. showing mass raids and detentions have been successful in frightening the migrant community. Agustin told us it's been 2 months since anyone hired him to cross the border. But many who have been working in migration long enough doubt the current trend will last.
Es una necesidad querer moverse, querer huir.
People are escaping because they can't live in the places they are from. It's a reality they can't escape, and people count on the United States being a safe place. The question now is it still a safe place for them?
These families, at least, are betting that it still is. But for now, faced with an uncertain timeline, they're just trying to make life as normal as possible in what are some very abnormal times. Julia Galliano, Al Jazeera, Nogales, Mexico.
Plans to house hundreds of asylum seekers near a quiet town in southeast England have triggered weeks of protest. As public pressure grows, the government is tightening immigration rules. Milena Veselinovic reports.
The look may be festive, but the message is not. On a Sunday morning in Crowborough, in the southeast of England, residents marched against plans to house asylum seekers in a former army barracks on the edge of town. What are you concerned about?
It doesn't matter where they were from. It's just the fact that suddenly 500 to 600 males, young males, will be in the town and wandering around with nothing to do.
I can't believe Keir Starmer is actually ignoring Crowborough and not making any comment about what is happening. We've made a stand. We've told them, you know, Crowborough is not happy.
The momentum here is building.
Well, people have been protesting in this town for weeks now, and what is happening here is reflective of the wider mood in this country.
You need to go.
Over the summer, angry protests flared outside hotels housing asylum seekers, triggered by the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl and a woman by an Ethiopian man who had arrived on a small boat just days earlier. And in response, the centre-left Labour government rolled out the biggest tightening of immigration rules in 50 years.
Every area of the immigration system, work, family and study, will be tightened up so we have more control.
Those reaching the port of Dover after crossing the English Channel in small boats could wait up to 30 years to gain residency. This government policy to fortify Britain's borders is shaped by public opinion. According to a recent poll, 2/3 of UK adults think that there are too many people coming to this country. Nearly half believe that immigration has had a negative impact on the UK overall, and 73% of those polled say that they are concerned about the rise in small boats crossing the English Channel. But despite that perception, net migration is down by 2/3, driven by previous curbs on overseas workers and students. Though outside this visa centre in Islamabad, many remain hopeful of a future in the UK.
I guess the behaviour of people and the facilities available there are far better than those in Pakistan, and that's why so many people are attracted to that country. It's a reality that some students travel to the UK, abandon their studies and seek asylum.
In Britain, those fears are driving a fraught debate over immigration, a debate that's reshaping the country's relationship with the wider world. Milena Veselinovic, Al Jazeera, Southeast England.
Lauren Starkey is an independent social worker. She says the British government is not interested in solutions that would adequately help asylum seekers.
The past couple of years have been the deadliest on record for people seeking protection in the UK dying in the Channel. Now, the UK is the 6th richest nation on earth. We have the capacity to be able to support people who are in need of protection. But the problem we have is one that is of an unmanaged system. We don't have any way for people to arrive through regular means. Because what is kind of fueling a lot of anger at the moment is the use of hotels, the use of these large sites to contain people, which really spark community tensions, because it does cause a failure of integration. What you end up doing is sort of warehousing people in clumps rather than integrating them into communities. A couple of years ago, there were 10,000 cases roughly waiting for appeals to be heard of refused asylum claims. That number is now almost 70,000. That's largely because of poor Home Office decision making, which sees more cases go to appeal. But when a case is going to an appeal, that means that person is left waiting longer and longer periods of time. And we don't allow them to work during that time. And studies have shown we could raise billions for the UK economy by allowing people to work whilst they're in the asylum system. We'd also enable them to build skills so they are more able to stand on their own 2 feet after being granted asylum. There are real solutions here. And what's really unfortunate is that we've got a government that is prioritising cruelty and harshness, when in fact what's been shown time and time again to be the most effective solution is to treat people with compassion and with human dignity, and to prioritise community cohesion and integration.
Thousands of villages across Russia are being abandoned. Young people are moving to cities for new opportunities, and this means schools, clinics, and other facilities in rural towns have to close their doors. Yulia Shapovalova reports from Russia's Tver region, just outside Moscow.
This abandoned church of the Presentation of the Lord in the Korkosh village was built at the beginning of the 19th century. It was decorated with Christian-themed frescoes, which are still seen on the ceiling and the walls. The crosses on the cathedral's dome are destroyed too, and there is no one to fix them.
Korkosh is just one of many abandoned villages scattered across Russia's Tver region. Time and the weather have done their job, leaving the creepy signs of decay.
What once used to be strong collective farms and agricultural lands with crops and cattle has now turned into hundreds of kilometers of isolated land and uninhabited settlements with a few elderly villagers living in their old ramshackle huts. And it's just some 200 kilometers northwest of Moscow.
But the exodus from villages in Russia began quite a while ago. During Tsarist times, peasants were tied to the land, unable to leave their owners' estates. Under Soviet rule, people were forced into collective farms and denied passports, which made them unable to move freely within the country. They received the right to choose where to live only in 1974, and that triggered the outflow of the villages.
There used to be a lot more people here. We had a school and a hospital, but now the young people have left.
None of the few people we met in Koi, once a large settlement with a rich history, were optimistic that life will ever return to these places.
There are only 2 or 3 young families with kids left, like ours. Other villages are much older. Some people become alcoholics. Others don't want to work.
Not long ago, people were still living here. Now there are not many left. Entire villages with rich histories are quietly fading away, right next to the capital. The Russian village, its traditions and its way of life is simply disappearing. Yulia Shapovalova, Al Jazeera, the Tver region.
Still ahead here on Al Jazeera, Peter has the sports.
That's right, Egypt have their second win in as many AFCON games, but the 7-time African champions may have had a bit of luck on their side against South Africa. That's coming up next.
A witness documentary on Al Jazeera.
Every war leaves a devastating impact on the environment. Earthrise explores some of the efforts to recover what was lost. From the Syrian scientists safeguarding one of our most valuable resources,
these are important samples. We have to make sure they are surviving.
To the refugees striving to coexist with nature.
Okay, so what's going on there?
They are simulating what happens when an elephant comes.
Life after conflict on Al Jazeera.
Zambia and Comoros have given themselves a shot at reaching the Africa Cup of Nations last 16. The two sides played out a 0-0 draw in Casablanca. It means Comoros have their first point, while the Copper Bullets move to 2 points. Mali and host nation Morocco are the other teams in Group A. Earlier, Egypt secured their last 16 place by beating South Africa in Agadir. The Pharaohs went ahead through a Mohamed Salah penalty. But they were down to 10 men just before half-time. Mohamed Hani red-carded for this foul. Bafana Bafana felt unlucky not to be awarded a penalty for this, but the rules say it cannot be handball if the falling player is using his hand for support. And so it finished 1-0 to Egypt. Angola and Zimbabwe both have their first points of this year's Africa Cup of Nations. It was the Angolans who took the lead through Gelson Dala. The Warriors drew level in first half stoppage time, courtesy of the veteran Knowledge Musona. 1-1 it finished in Marrakesh. Both sides lost their opening match, but remain in the hunt for a last 16 place. On the eve of the tournament, CAF announced that from 2028, the Africa Cup of Nations will be held every 4 years instead of usually 2. Instead, a new annual Nations League will be introduced. They also said holding the tournament every 4 years would be less disruptive for European-based teams and European club football. Mali's coach is not happy about the decision.
Very disappointing.
'Ibrahim